The Indian peacekeepers proved powerless to stop him. A Lebanese army officer is called to bring the villager back. The mayor of Kfar Shuba explains the locals only accept the UN presence with conditions.
To maintain an atmosphere of friendship and respect, the UNIFIL forces must remain committed to a number of points. Firstly, they should remain calm and act wisely and cautiously, especially given that this land is ours, and they know that. Secondly, they shouldn't think that they can exceed the authority of the Lebanese army and presume full power in the south.
Lebanon's international border was drawn up in 1923 by Colonels Paulet and Newcomb, French and British officers at the time of the French Mandate of Lebanon and the British Mandate of Palestine. Dr. Issam Khalifa, professor of history at the Lebanese University, is a specialist on the region's border disputes.
Greater Lebanon was announced by General Henri Gouraud. This is the map of Gouraud. The problem lies in the contradiction between Resolution 318, which sets Lebanon's borders at Hasbaya, including Sheba Farms and Sheba Town, and the map attached to Resolution 318, which places the farms outside of Lebanon. The problem started from here.
The inconsistencies of these colonial cartographers in defining the borders between Lebanon, Syria and Palestine created problems for the future. From 1939, joint Syrian-Lebanese committees were set up to arbitrate land disputes between residents of the Sheba Farms area. The first document recognizing Lebanese sovereignty over the Sheba Farms dates back to March 27, 1946.
This is the Syrian-Lebanese report, signed by both governments, in which Syria admits the Sheba Farms is Lebanese land. 13 Lebanese farms. This report, attached to this map, is signed. The map shows the border points from point 7 to point 49. So there is a clear demarcation of the border between Lebanon and Syria regarding the farms. Lebanon did not submit this agreement to the United Nations. The borders were set and demarcated, but this was not submitted to the UN Maps Department.
Over the years, joint Syrian-Lebanese committees continued to arbitrate on land disputes among farmers in the area. But then the Six-Day War in 1967 changed everything. In its devastating victory, Israel seized, among other Arab land, the Golan Heights and the Sheba Farms area. Jamil Said, Lebanon's former chief of general security, has for years closely tracked the Sheba Farms case.
Since independence and up until 1967, shortly before the invasion, there was a demarcation of the Syrian-Lebanese border from the north to the east, up to the Sheba region. A file was created for each disputed area. The Sheba Farms file had the title Case 21. So 2 or 3 months before the 1967 war, we had agreed on the international border and territorial sovereignty. Both parties had agreed and signed.
In the late 60s and 70s, the Sheba Farms region and surrounding areas became a front for the Palestine Liberation Organization. After the Arab-Israeli War in October 1973, the UN deployed peacekeeping troops to the Golan Heights. The occupied Sheba Farms area came under the operational remit of this UN force, known as UNDOF. The UN clearly considered the Sheba Farms as part of the Syrian Golan Heights. Nestled in a mountainside beside the occupied Sheba Farms is the town of Sheba. Today, the town of Sheba is under Lebanese control. Israel withdrew from here in 2000. town elders still hold documents, which they say prove their possession of the overlooking hilltops. Omar Hashim is one of these elders. He points to the land he says he owns, and he produces documents in support of his claim.
We own the farthest farm, called Khalad Ghazala. We have a Lebanese document of ownership dating back to 1943. I have it here with me, and many more documents. This is the document of possession of Khalad Ghazala, the furthest farm in Shab'a farms on the Palestinian-Syrian border.
Lebanese sovereignty over the Sheba farms is also emphasized by Hezbollah. The group rejects calls for its disarmament, based on the premise that Israel still occupies Lebanese land.
The Lebanese people all agree that the Sheba farms belong to Lebanon. There was some controversy sparked by internal political unrest. However, this land is definitely and undoubtedly Lebanese territory. As for Syria, there are several statements made by Syrian officials declaring that the Sheba farms is Lebanese territory.
Across the border in Israel, the view is different. Amos Harel is a military affairs analyst with the Israeli Haaretz newspaper. He explains that Israel considers the Sheba Farms region as Syrian territory.
When you talk to both Israeli politicians and Israeli experts in geography, they claim that Sheba Farms was never a part of the Lebanese state, and it was actually held by Syria, that before '67, both the village of Rajar and the Sheba Farms were under a Syrian regime. So Israel claims differently.
Medhat Salah is a Syrian government official in charge of the Golan Heights file. He rejects the Israeli claim that the Sheba farms belong to Syria.
The Syrian position is clear. The Sheba farms is Lebanese territory, and President Bashar al-Assad has confirmed that. The Lebanese are aware of this, and there is a Syrian-Lebanese agreement on that.
These hills are part of the Israeli-occupied Sheba farms, as filmed from the Lebanese side of the Blue Line. An old sign showing the symbol of Lebanon, the cedar tree, suggests Lebanon's historic claim to this region.
Yes.
The Indian UN troops get nervous at our presence on the Blue Line border.
Yes, Al Jazeera channel.
You wait here, sir. My officer is come here, and your photography, please.
Okay, but we have permission. Oh, we have permission.
Please.
Okay.
Only for 5 minutes.
They are not the only ones wary. An Israeli patrol passes by. The area we are in is particularly sensitive. At this precise spot in the year 2000, 3 Israeli soldiers were captured by Hezbollah in a daring sting operation. As elsewhere, the blue line here is ambiguous, an explosive front line marked only by intermittent painted barrels. In 2000, when Israel informed the UN of its plan to withdraw from South Lebanon, then UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan sent his special envoy, Norwegian diplomat Terry Rod Larsen, to the region. His mission was to negotiate a line of withdrawal. The blue line is not supposed to be the final decision on the international border.
The blue line is not the border. The blue line is, the official name is actually a line of withdrawal. This was the line which was identified in 2000 by the United Nations for the sole purpose of verifying Israeli withdrawal from the Lebanese territory. So it was done without any prejudice to a future border demarcation agreement between Lebanon and Israel or between Lebanon and Syria.
Israel surprised the UN by withdrawing from South Lebanon sooner than expected. Larsen rushed back to the region. He personally supervised the demarcation of the blue line in consultation with all sides. At times, the process involved haggling over inches. Neither side wanted to compromise. There were a number of places which proved especially difficult to secure agreement from both Lebanon and Israel, including the Sheba Farms region.
Both Lebanon and Israel had reservations about this line, and they voiced their reservations in 2000. However, the point at that time was to disengage the forces, to have the Israeli army withdraw back to Israel.
Israel refused to withdraw from the Sheba Farms region. Lebanon declared Israel's withdrawal in 2000 to be incomplete. To this day, Lebanon